The following information is left to us by Hubert Henry Harrison in his book When Africa Awakes, in the chapter International Consciousness, under the title The Rising Tide of Color. Mr. William Randolph Hearst, the ablest white publicist in America, has broken loose and in a recent editorial in the New York American has absolutely endorsed every word of the warning recently issued by Lothrop Stoddard in his book, The Rising Tide of Color. In justice to Mr. Hearst, it must be pointed out, as we ourselves did in 1916, that he saw this handwriting on the wall long ago. Mr. Hearst is not particularly famous as a friend of the darker races, but one must give him credit for having seen what was involved in the war between the white nations of Europe and America. As far back as 1915, the present writer was engaged in pointing out to white people that the racial aspect of the war in Europe was easily the most important, despite the fact that no American paper, nor even Mr. Hearst's, would present that side of the matter for the consideration of its readers. Now, however, they are beginning to wake up, as people generally do when disaster is upon them. Frantically, with much screaming and flapping of arms, but in such cases the doom approaching is but the ripened result of deeds that have been done and is therefore absolutely inescapable. The white race has lied and strutted its way to greatness and prominence over the corpses of other people. It has capitalized, Christianized, and made respectable, scientific, and natural the fact of its dominion. It has read back into history the race relations of today, striving to make the point that previous to its advent on the stage of human history, there was no civilization or culture worthy of the name. It admonishes us that if it were to pass off the stage as a controlling factor in the world's destiny, there would be no civilization or culture remaining. Naturally, we take exception to both these views. For of the past we know better, and for the future we think better of the many peoples who make up the cycle of civilization. But these conditions are not the gravest at present. The fact of most tremendous import is that the white race is trying to settle its own quarrels, has called in black, brown, and yellow to do its fighting for it, with the result that black, brown, and yellow will learn thereby how to fight for themselves, even against those whom they were called in to assist. The white race cannot escape from its dilemma, however. If it were to decree hereafter that wars between whites should be restricted to whites alone, then we should be given the poignant spectacle of the white race continuing to cut its own throat, while the increasing masses of black, brown, and yellow remain unaffected by that process. It is to laugh, as the cynical gods would say, or to use a trite Americanism, it is, heads I win, tails you lose. It is thumbs down for the white race in the world's arena, and they are to be the dealers of their own death blow. Such are the consequences of conquest. The analogy is between the present situation of the white race and the situation of the Roman Empire in the 4th century of the Christian era are too many and striking to be easily ignored. Now as then, we have barbarians and supermen. Now as then, the supermen are such in their own estimation. Now as then, they have, as they fondly think, a monopoly of the money, power, brain power, political power of the world. Now as then, the necessities of their own selfishness and greed constrains and compel them to share their education and their culture with the races whom they exploit. Now as then, in the crisis of their fortunes, they must utilize the knowledge and abilities of these barbarian folk. And now as then, This exercising of abilities on behalf of the overlord develops abilities and ambition at an equal rate. And having given the barbarian tiger its first taste of blood, the unleashed results cannot now be restrained. In the Roman days, as in the days of Charlemagne's successors, those who hold the balances generally also wield the sword. And if their blood and sand determine which among the rulers shall get the prizes of victory, then these same qualities must needs urge them to take from such victors by proxy so much of the fruits of victory as their own needs may suggest or their own power maintain. Truly, they that take the sword shall perish by the sword. Unquote.